Hi everyone, my name is Reema and I'm here to talk a little bit about Jainism in the digital age. So the first question that lots of people seem to ask me is how does Jainism relate to anything digital? It's a 4,000-year-old religion. It seems to be more about how we treat others. And I wanted to speak to that a little bit today because Jainism carries a set of principles, despite the fact that it is 4,000 years old. Jainism actually carries a set of principles that can be used in a day-to-day practice. So not only is Jainism a religion that can be um, practiced in a ceremonial way, but also Jainism is a set of life philosophies and principles that can be practiced day to day. So the way that I am going to be framing this presentation is I would like to talk a little bit about ahimsa. So things to consider when thinking about ahimsa and Jainism. In Jainism, we talk about ahimsa as something that binds karma to our soul. So himsa means violence. Therefore, ahimsa, non-violence. And violence will bind negative karma to our soul. However, there's varying levels of the amount of karma that can be bound to us just based on the kind of violence in which we are engaging. So the idea in Jainism is not, or the idea in Jainism is not black and white. It's not you either do or you do not, there is no try. Basically what it is in Jainism, you want to reduce your the impact of your violence as much as possible. And in so doing, actually create a practice in which you're trying to reduce your harm to others as much as possible. So in Jainism, there's three different types of frameworks that I like, or there's three different types of Jain frameworks I like to use when talking about ahimsa. So one of them is the framework of thought, word, or deed. Basically, that we do things through either thought or word or deed. Now, the interesting thing about that is that doing things through thought or word or deed actually has different impact on the other. So a different impact of violence on the other. So for example, if I think about, talking to someone in a mean way on the internet versus if I, actually externalize that thing, one of those things is actually creating harm to the other. And one of those things is just kind of hanging out in my own head. Now, useful to note that in Jainism, this idea of word is usually directed in terms of speech, right? Like to make verbal. Because of the fact that a verbal understanding shifts when we're looking at digital media, it is also important to consider the ways in which typing or communicating an idea is similar to word or deed, depending on what the idea is that you're communicating and how you're communicating it. So just something to remember. The second thing that's valuable to note about ahimsa is in Jainism, there is consideration for things that we do intentionally and things that we do unintentionally. What that means is that when we do things with intention, we are actually kind of more in control of what's going on for us. And so there is something, we are more in control not only about what's going on for us, but also about what we're doing to the other. Now, the thing that's relevant and useful to note here is that things that are unintentional can still be harmful. So for example, if I am talking to a friend of mine and I say something really mean about third person X, well, they might still learn that message and therefore still be met with harm. And so we want to be careful not just about what we are doing directly to people, but also indirectly. And that feeds very nicely into this next point. So in Jainism, we also have a consideration of, are we doing something ourselves? Are we encouraging others to do? Or are we witnessing? And in this case, violent action. So if we are doing something ourselves, it is considered to be more violent than encouraging others or witnessing, usually. However, witnessing violence and encouraging violence are also things that can cause us to have an impact on the lives of a third person. So if I tell someone to rob a bank, or if I compel someone to rob a bank, even though I'm not doing it myself, that doesn't necessarily mean that I am not causing harm to the other, if that makes sense. So when we think about the impact of digital media and our use of digital media on other people, I'm sure that everybody has had many different presentations on cyberbullying, so I'm going to keep it very short and very sweet. But what I'm going to say is, the more violently you behave towards other people, even if it's just words, it can actually still very much impact the other person that you're talking to. And so it is very important to be mindful of how your behavior impacts other people. Essentially, that's all I want to say about that at this time. With regards to digital media and the impact of our use on other people, it's also important to consider how easily we can consume using the internet. So for example, we can just go click, 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 and go on like Amazon and just buy whatever we want. But sometimes we forget how those things get from point A to point B, and to consider the idea, or in Amazon's case, point A to point Z, I guess. But there's value in considering how the things we are creating are created, and the supply chain and the impact of the supply chain. So lately in the news, because of COVID, there's been a lot of commentary about Amazon workers, people who are like in very close proximity to each other. And when we consume some of these things, when we buy online, for example, we are actually keeping those organizations in business by creating a supply, by creating a demand that they need to continue to supply. So recognizing that your clicking consumption is just as much consumption, if not more, impactful than just going to a store and buying a thing. There is also value in remembering where those items come from to begin with. We are going to talk a little bit about sustainability and consumption over the course of this week. But it is important to remember, is the thing that you are buying sustainable? Is it harming people around the world? For example, through sweatshops, who's making it? Who's picking the cotton? Who's, who, like, people are being impacted around the world based on our consumption choices. So it's always important to think about, where is this coming from? Is there a less impactful way to acquire the same thing? Do I need the thing? All of those things become valuable questions. Finally, this is something that we don't often think about, but the amount of digital devices that are being used are actually creating a very high carbon dioxide output. And so what ends up happening is we end up actually creating a higher and higher carbon dioxide input. And the more people around the world are using are using digital objects, so phones, computers, and I'm not suggesting that an individual necessarily makes a pronounced difference, but what I am suggesting is that there are many different ways in which we can reduce our impact on the world. And one of them is to consider how much electricity that we're using, and as well, what our carbon footprint actually looks like. I think that there's also value in considering the impact of digital media, and the use of digital media, and how it impacts ourselves. So the first thing that's valuable to consider is the consumption of advertising. One of the things that we do now more than ever in human history is we actually consume thousands and thousands and thousands of ads a day. What that means is we are looking at more images of of things that we might want, which might increase our use and increase our consumption. And second, and far more importantly, we are looking at more images of ideal beauty. The thing about idealized beauty for anyone of any gender means that we have actually spent a lot of time looking at images of people that are considered to be conventionally beautiful. Being people who live both in South Asia and North America, or being people who are influenced by the cultures of South Asia and North America, we already have two different sets of what is considered ideal beauty fighting against itself. And then on top of that, consuming thousands upon thousands of ads a day actually can very much shape our perception of what we feel we should look like and what we feel the ideal person looks like. So the reason that I bring this up, and this flows very nicely into this next point of comparison, is we actually do a lot of violence towards ourselves. In Jainism, it is important to consider the idea that violence is not only about violence to the other, but also about violence to the self. So if you consider the idea of taking an image of yourself and then cropping the image, you are in some cases literally cutting off parts of yourself in order to fit a version of beauty that that you may not fit when somebody is simply looking at you. Additionally, using filters, for example, shifts the colors and shape of your face in such a way that you might be actually comparing yourself not just to other people and other idealized images of beauty, but in fact, idealized images of beauty of your own face. What do I mean by that? So lightened skin, lightened eyes, lightened hair, shifts in facial structure and body structure. And all of that becomes an unattainable version of self. And there's value in considering what exactly it is you are consuming, what exactly it is you're comparing yourself to, and why. I'm not necessarily suggesting to stop using Instagram because every fourth post is an ad, but more to say critically assess what it is you're looking at and what you want to do with that information. It makes a huge difference in how you treat yourself if you're actually able to critically think about what is this ad trying to sell me and why. Another thing that we do is we compare ourselves to other people's achievements. And one thing that I always like to point out is that people curate their versions of their lives. So they literally say, this is what I want to show, this is what I don't want to show. So we are actually comparing ourselves to somebody else's ideal version of self. We actually find ourselves comparing ourselves to people's best versions of themselves. So their highest grades, their honor rolls, their dance performances, their engagements, their weddings, their graduations, their degrees, their biggest achievements. But we don't actually get to see the day-to-day and the harm. And the challenge that we have here is because we are actually people who, everybody is a person who sees something and may want it, but there's also value in considering, what am I seeing about this person? Why is it that they want to show that thing to the world, to me? And is that something that I really want? Because sometimes it's not. Some things to consider. Finally, on the note of critical assessment, Jainism puts a lot of emphasis on critical assessment of ideas, looking at ideas, considering the self, considering the other, considering the world. In terms of critical assessment of ideas, like, something as simple as, why am I angry about this, right? Or why am I attached to this image? Or why do I care about this thing? All of those kinds of things are questions that we ask when we introspect, when we look inward. Um, Sometimes what we do, for example, when we are on social media and consuming news or content or ideas, is we don't actually critically assess what we're reading or what we're looking at. And in recent years, we've seen this kind of uprise in people talking about people talking about the idea of the echo chamber. So, if all the media content I look at is about how how bananas are good and bananas are really healthy, then perhaps more of my search results and more of the content that's geared to me, perhaps my advertising, will be banana related, for example. So I might not get to see content about things like apples or oranges. Um, I know that's a silly example, but there's value in considering what you're seeing and what you're not seeing. And there's value in looking at ideas from both sides and then making a choice. Or from multiple sides, rather, not even both, and then making a choice. It is also important to consider where you learned certain ideas. So, for example, we are raised with certain principles and certain ideas in our families, in society, in our schools. And it's important to recognize why it is we believe some of the things that we believe. So, what do we do about this? The thing about my understanding about Jainism in the digital age is that I think that there's a lot of value in taking some time to consider what it is you're consuming, why it is you're consuming those things, and what else you could be consuming. I also think that there's a lot of value in looking at it from the perspective of ahimsa. What are the thoughts? What are the thoughts and words and deeds I'm engaging in? What am I witnessing? What am I encouraging others to do? And what am I doing myself? And how much of it is unintentional and how much of it is intentional? Because the thing is, we still impact the others and we still impact the self, whether things are intentional or unintentional. And there's always value in trying to make conscious, better choices. Now, the irony of this is I'm going to ask you to engage with me on digital media and let me know what you thought about these ideas. I'd be curious to see if you have any opinions one way or the other. I'd also like to thank you for watching and hope you've enjoyed the videos that you've seen so far and hope you enjoy what comes next. And yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.